Welcome to the Executive Coach Podcast. This is the podcast that helps you move from overwork to a place of more clarity, ease, and success in your work and lives. And I'm Maya, your host. Today, we're continuing our money journey. What you might have noticed so far is that we've stayed on the side of desires, vision, and mindset, that part of the money equation. And for some of you, that might be great. And others might be thinking, just tell me what I'm meant to do. Like, what actions am I meant to take? But we're still not done. Today, I have a concept that I think is absolutely fascinating and so important if we are to truly experience our personal financial self discovery. Full credit to Remit Sethi here. This is his concept, and he is an absolute wealth of knowledge on all this stuff. So definitely go and check his stuff out. And the concept is that of money dials. And so, what I'm going to start by doing is explaining what these are, why they're helpful. I'm going to be basing it on one of Ramit's articles. We're then going to think through what some of these money dials are. And then we're just going to add a bit of an executive coach twist to it as well and ask some other questions that can help us in our journey of financial discovery. So, in a nutshell, your money dials are the things that you're willing to spend extravagantly on, or they're the things that you love to spend money on. And then you can cut back on the areas that are not part of your money dials. And I will admit that at first, when I came across this term, I wasn't convinced that I had any money dials. Then I realized, in fact, that I do love to spend on convenience. And I thought through various exchanges that I've had with friends where I realized that I was basically saying that I loved to spend on convenience. And we often view the world through our own money dial lenses. So hopefully today, even if you think you have no money dials right now, you'll learn in this episode where your money dials might actually lie. Ramit says, show me a person's spending and I can show you what they truly love. And he has spent obviously years talking to people about their spending habits, and he has distilled this into 10 money dials. The reason they're called money dials is because you can tune them up or down just like a dial. And what he says is that if you were to look at somebody's spending for even just 10 minutes, you would pretty quickly be able to spot what their money dial is. And if he was to look at my spending, he could tell me what my money dial is. And what this allows you to do is understand why people make the choices they do and go much deeper than a surface level or even just a rational conversation. The reason why this is so fascinating is because people go where their time and money go. That is your trail, that is your pathway and direction, and it really paves that way. So, for example, fit people spend time and money to be fit. Fashionable people spend time and money reading fashion magazines and shopping. Now, the interesting bit is where there's misalignment. So, somebody might say family's number one, but if you look at their calendars and spending, family's not even in the top 10. So, money dials can start to become a really useful tool to help us understand where there's misalignment. So, where we think something's important, but actually our money does not follow. And likewise, it gives us a really good blueprint and roadmap as to where we can spend more extravagantly and experience that sense of rich life, and where we can then cut back mercilessly so that we can really make the most of our budgets. And so, obviously, over the years, Ramit has talked to a lot of people and come up with a top 10 money dials. Now, these are just the most common ones. There may, as we go through this, and I certainly found this, you might think, actually, I'd probably want to chuck in this, or why is this missing? So just think of these as the starter for 10 and start to notice where it is a clear fit for you in terms of your money dials. So let's just dive into the list of the top 10. So the top 10 are convenience, and Ramit highlights that that is actually his number one money dial. Travel, health and fitness, experiences, freedom, relationships, generosity, luxury, social status, and self-improvement. And We're going to dive into some of these in a bit more detail. But what Ramit is encouraging us to do is start to build a life where we are able to spend more extravagantly and unapologetically on those things that matter to us. And I guess what's exciting about his approach is that he wants us to really turn that dial all the way up. So I listen to a lot of his conversations, and what he's getting people to do is figure out what those dials are. And then he'll say the classic, okay, well, what if you 10x that? And that's trying to explode people's thinking in those areas. And it is exciting because these are the things which they truly care about. And so I think when you have that matching of what somebody already knows is so important to them, and then they're being encouraged and supported to think really big, even if it is a bit unrealistic, I think that's a really exciting way of thinking. So let's have a think about some of what these money dials might actually look like in practice. So the number one that he's identified is convenience. And so he's talking about spending on anything that makes your life more convenient. That could be travel apps, Uber rides, having the extra iPhone charger, pre cooked meals, getting everything delivered, automated bank accounts. And this is his favorite money dial. He has turned it all the way up. He talks about spending a lot on personal trainer, chef, luxury services to streamline his life, reduce stress in those areas, have a VA, and he also gives some more attainable ways of dialing this one up, like buying pre-cut vegetables at the grocery store. And he shares some examples from readers. So people have had meal sort of delivery or prep services so that when they come home, what they need for dinner is right there for them, and they love buying back that time. And I do think that's a core part of the convenience dial, is that actually what sits underneath that is really deeply valuing time. And I certainly relate to this one. I associate it with also value. And I've been having a WhatsApp conversation with a friend. My kids have been going to a local camp. The camp is a 3-minute walk from home, and it's from 9 till 5, and it's a really high quality camp. And that's in half term. And I said to my friend, did I mention that it's a 3-minute walk? Did I mention that it's 9 to 5? And she was like, yes, of course you did. Because for me, those things are worth their absolute weight in gold. But we've taken this to a whole new level as well in terms of the location. The location of where we live is really dialing up the convenience factor. And basically, I could do an entire podcast on all of the decisions that I have made that kind of feed into that convenience factor. And what's really useful here is that until I came across these money dials, in my head, because that's my lens through which I see the world, I would filter other decisions according to that lens and think, well, why is somebody cutting off their nose to spite their face? So I think it can be really useful in helping us understand dynamics and relationships and what our people around us care about as well. So the second one is travel. What you might notice in somebody that has a really high money dial is that, come start of the year, January the 1st, they know exactly where they're traveling. They're masters at travel hacking. They have an endless list of travel destinations. You can talk to them endlessly about travel, and they will also maybe have opinions on the right suitcase and way to pack and how to get the best seats. So what Ramit would then encourage is to really dial that up for people to say, then once a year, when you've got a longer break, to be able to take your family to Paris for a full month and rent a beautiful apartment above a patisserie. That would be his example of really exploding that and taking it to another level. So the next one that you've got is health and fitness. And he uses the example of LeBron James, who spends 1.5 million a year keeping his body on top form. That includes cryotherapy, hyperbaric chambers. So everything in his life is focused on achieving peak physical fitness. There are other examples, like really choosing your gym based on quality, not based on distance to your house and apartment, which I guess would be the convenience style if that was the priority. Having a personal trainer or nutritionist, choosing food based on goals, not simply on taste, and being selective about the quality rather than, I don't know, the aesthetic of your workout gear. So then he talks about how you would dial this up. It might be going to yoga retreats, it might be joining social groups based on fitness. And then he gives examples from readers. So one reader pays a nutritionist every month. Another spends a lot on a personal trainer, and another one makes the real time and space to go to a very specific karate dojo in town, and therefore they get to train with one of the best masters in Europe, and it's one of the best decisions that they've made. The next one is experiences, and I think the nice thing about this one is probably that's a generic term, and then within this there's probably a lot of categories that you might be able to find for yourself. So, somebody who values novelty and unique experiences over material possessions, and they might want to do something like skydiving or concerts or unique experiences on holiday, like when you go to a specific area, being able to actually swim with the whales, or it could be dinners at Michelin star restaurants. And then Ramit gives an example of how he's recently been turning his money dial on this front up. So what I like here is that, yes, you might have a dominant money dial, but you may also have other areas which matter to you. And certainly as we go through these, I've noticed areas that I know I like already and I'm already turned up quite a lot on. But I guess you can take a look at all of them, and you can also, almost in a menu fashion, have a look and say, actually, what do I really want to turn up this year as one of my money dials? So I like that way of looking at it as well. And he gave some examples of how when they went for their honeymoon, they ended up paying a photographer, and it was really expensive, to get some amazing pictures at the Taj Mahal. And he really loves having those, even though they were really disproportionately expensive. And it sort of captured the experience for him. So I guess he's also lumping in the idea of then capturing things into experiences, which resonates with me a lot, because I care about photos and then how you manage your photos and things like that. The next one he's got is freedom. And this, again, I think can go in a lot of different directions. But for him, he's talking about not having to worry about money all the time and being able to have the freedom to travel and work on things that interest him. And he's had examples from readers. So one reader talks about the freedom dial as being so wonderful in that they've been able to self-fund a maternity leave, even though they don't have employment. They've been able to use their money in that way. Or somebody else's wife was about to finish her medical residency, as they do in the US, but they're in a position where she can really choose how much she wants to work and pick the hours that she wants, rather than having to worry about her family's financial health. So that feels like real freedom. So these are just tangible examples of what freedom can feel like, being able to kind of, I guess the common theme between Ramit and this example of the wife is that there's that real freedom of around work and how people are able to work. Next one is relationships. And I find this one really interesting, the way that Ramit has described it. He talks about a 40 something friend who really is in an incredible financial position, but has chosen, rather than many things that he could do, he's chosen to live near his family, because his family relationships are the most important to him. And he's therefore had to live in a much more expensive area, and he's ended up having to do other various financial things that mean that actually he lives a relatively modest life. But the important thing for him is having that proximity to his family. For other people, it's as simple as going all out on birthday greetings, wedding cards, really kind of making sure that it's a really special card. Could be spending on holidays for older parents, making sure that they get a lovely trip. So there's some really nice examples in there. The next money dial is generosity. And what Ramit talks about here is that people, a lot of, the typical thing would be you donate to specific charities on a regular basis or at the end of the year. But if it's your money dial, then you might do things really differently. You might surprise your nieces and nephews with gifts just because, or on your birthday, you might throw an event and raise a lot of money for your favorite charity. He gives an example of how he did something similar to that. And it can be either done in sort of charitable ways, or it can be in for sort of extended family and family members and friends, that generosity can be channeled in those directions. I've heard him coach people on his podcast where generosity is a huge dial, and he really helps them take that up a notch and say, okay, well, what if you could really create something special with your money here on that generosity dial? The next one is luxury. And I would probably personally give this a slightly different name, which would be luxury or luxurious, because I talk a lot about what feels luxurious to people. And I think that can get away from what I think is quite a narrow line otherwise, which is that of kind of luxury items that are packaged well, or labels or brands, which I personally don't always think encapsulates luxury fully. But I guess what he's highlighting is that for some people, spending much more on an item that they could have spent a lot less on because of the quality, because of certain features of it, because of its longevity sometimes is for some people a real money dial. So one reader gave an example of a well-designed high quality backpack because they commute every day, so having a really nice one makes a big difference. Another one talks about some really expensive shoes, but they constantly get comments and they have really upgraded the person's appearance. Another person talks about some boots that were 700, bought 7 years ago, and they still work really well. So there's an element there of, I think, functionality and value as well. And I personally would be adding here another category around value. So I'll take the example of interiors. If I have the option of two tables, and one is the luxury designer option and one is not, but it looks the same, I will go for the one. I will actively search the ones that look just as great but don't have that attached to it, and then I'll spend freely. So personally, I do think it's a money dial because I have a quite clearly honed idea of what I think value is. And if I think there's value, I will not hold back in any way. That includes, for example, for an Indian outfit, I love my Indian dancing every year. We go for the festival. And there was a skirt that my friend who was with me thought was pretty expensive, but I knew it had been handmade. I knew so much thought had gone into it. It had also been designed for those of us that are more vertically challenged, which is a real problem when you're wearing Indian outfits. And so I knew all of that. And so for me, it was a no brainer. And I was really happy to buy that. I wouldn't call it luxury, but I would call it value. So I do think there is some nuance here that you may want to explore for yourself as well, and really figure out what that looks like for you. Because what I've noticed for me is that if I have, done the thinking and the work to know that something is value, then I won't hold back. However, when it comes to certain designer items, I wouldn't want anything that is noticeably or visibly a label. Does that mean that I don't care for luxury? It just means that luxury might mean slightly different things to me than the kind of textbook definition I think that Ramit has given. Money dial number 9 is social status. And Ramit heads this up by saying for some people this could feel a little bit shallow, and it can be, absolutely. But he just wants to give it some credit, which is that, for example, somebody got a $160 monthly subscription to Rent the Runway, which is a designer clothing site that sends you 4 pieces at a time. And now that individual spends less time making decisions about what to wear. It feels extravagant, but worth it. Personally, I would put that in either the convenience category or the luxury category. But I guess there's an element of what they wear now also has some signaling to it, that it kind of signals some social status. So I'm not completely convinced about this category. Feel free to challenge me on this one if you think actually there's some real validity here. He talks about how airlines, hotels, credit cards, they often offer loyalty cards that can get you extra benefits. And so in that sense, that is based on some sort of a higher status. It could be that you have, earned your status with them. So I guess in that regard, it could be seen as a social status piece. Right. The final one, and again, I would change the name of this one, is called self-improvement. So that is a money dial where people are into learning. They are into services that can help them, such as having a trainer at the gym. In his case, he's described that he's a big reader, and he's got a book buying rule whereby if a book looks even remotely interesting, he doesn't even waste time debating it. He just buys it. And if you gain one idea from the book, it makes it worth it. The other one that he's given as an example is the hotshot rule. So the Cinnabon president, Kat Cole, says that 4 times a year she goes somewhere quiet. She thinks about the state of the company and she asks herself, let's say a hotshot took over my job today. What are 2 or 3 things that hotshot would say, look at my business and say that's unacceptable? And what Ramit says is that that could be a great rule to apply to every area of our lives. If somebody came in and looked at certain aspects of your life, what you eat, what your relationships are like, your health, what would they say is unacceptable? Identify those areas, and that's where you can start making changes. I think I would call self-improvement, maybe, I think I've got a bit of an aversion to that term because it just feels like really hard work. It feels like I don't like the self element of it as well. It just feels very kind of, maybe it's antithetical to what the podcast is meant to be about, which is trying to do things with more ease and clarity. And it just feels very, to me, it feels very tightly wound. So I was trying to think of an alternative, and I thought maybe leveling up, maybe that would be a term. And maybe you guys can come up with some suggestions for a better name for this dial. Obviously, I care about it because it's my industry, it's what I do. It's also definitely identify with this money dial. I probably put a lot of time into this area, and then every now and then we'll make significant investments from a money perspective. So that's the final one. And really the question for you is, what stood out for you there? What do you think might be your dominant money dial? What might be something that you've noticed is different between yourself and your partner? And then it might be that you have 2 or 3 that kind of are like the higher, the ones that rank more highly. Now, we talk in the Vision Builder about signature strengths. And one of the things we talk about is when you get this unique combination of strengths, they become a signature, they become your signature strengths. And I actually think what's interesting here is when you start to combine some of these. So when you combine convenience with your fitness and health dials, right, you might end up with something super exciting. For example, when we moved to the area that we moved to, we knew that it had an incredible leisure center within walking distance. And so that then became a combination of both convenience and the fitness and health money dials. And so I think my build on this is that you can start to get really interesting when you pair or combine some of these dials together. And that's where you're going to get absolutely outsized returns. So that's one thing to think about. What are your dials? Was there anything missing there for you? What I started to notice was that these money dials, they're not exactly the same as values or how we would spend our time. So for example, for me, I really value time in nature. I appreciate beauty in my surroundings, and I want to create that. And I didn't quite see that reflected in these. But what I would say is either I'll create my own category of that, or perhaps that is a combination of both time and money. And so I guess, Ramit's lens here is the money lens. So I think there is a separate exercise around values and time and how we spend our time. And I think we could probably do time dials as well. So we could probably list out things where we think, okay, that's not really represented on our money dials, but they're actually things that I will happily spend more time on and not begrudge them. And I think we all have things like that we're just either really willing to do slowly and invest the time and really take the time, and there are other things that we just feel like they drain us and they don't suit us. And so we could probably do a similar time dials exercise. So that's something that I'm going to go away and think about as well. So have some fun with this. Try and share it with somebody and have a conversation with them. I would like to have this conversation with good friends and my husband, and I'd like us to brainstorm with each other and help each other to dial up our money dials. I think that's a really nice, supportive, fun thing to do. And I think sometimes those around us can see things in us that we can't see. So I think that could be a really cool way to play with these concepts. So if you found this helpful, definitely share it with somebody and send them the link, and then screenshot it, share it on social media, and let me know. Drop me a note on LinkedIn. And I look forward to connecting with you next time. Bye bye.